claim, evidence, reasoning, model to create effective scientific explanations. And you will have the knowledge and resources to teach your students what makes an effective scientific explanation. Participants are going to collaborate and determine the qualities of an effective scientific explanation, as well as practice creating an effective scientific explanation using the CER graphic organizer. So you're going to learn how to use it, you're going to practice using it, and we're also going to show you how you can teach your students to use the graphic organizer. On your 3x5, I know it says 5x7, but you have 3x5 cards. Please answer this prompt. What does an effective scientific explanation include? What does an effective scientific explanation include? Would anybody like to share? What does an effective science explanation include?
Data.
Data, okay. Include the data collected. What else? Yes.
Connections.
Connections or examples? Connections to,
Real world
okay,
situations
real
or
situations. Okay, so a way to explain. Okay, anything else?
The
Yes?
word because.
Because?
I tell them it's that simple.
Okay.
Here's your claim, because, and then here's your evidence.
Okay, good. Okay, so quick poll, and I just want you to think about this on your own for a minute. How do you use claims and evidence in your classroom? And it's okay to still be learning about it. Maybe you talk about it a little bit. Maybe your students are required to support their claims with evidence, but in your class discussions, maybe they have to write their claims and support them with evidence from either some or all of your labs. Or maybe you have discussions and writing activities that revolve around making claims and supporting them with evidence. A second here to kind of think, where are you on this continuum? And then a very quick talk to your neighbor. Where are you on this continuum?
That's it last time, like I'm still learning about it and freezing it. Right. And we're talking. So totally.
literature, but like in science, would be a good example that it is.
We're starting to write 2 or 3 sessions per year.
Do you fill out a sheet like this as you're doing that?
Discrepancies in there because they tend to. You don't get it.
I have a, but not in all my classes, so
like
this week, whenever
So
we're
throwing extra
investigating
things in, like that chunk
Like,
that we made, I did that with them at the
we
beginning of the year.
review,
Like,
the sugar sweet published
Yeah.
stories,
Like, they will
what's
include
the data
everything
they
that they
collected,
deserve.
weed out notes, like we review it.
But
But
I'm trying to find one where it was a little triple wide, and just
So then they
wide.
do
their findings.
They're writing
This is the
And that reflects on any evidence.
Yeah, that's where the writing piece I probably could use. So I have the word because in font 1000 on the front of my, I mean, the letters are this big. And if they say something without that word, I'm like, nope, it doesn't count. I'm like, don't even know what you're talking about. Because, and again, it doesn't have to be right or wrong, but it's that idea of, a ball bounces great. You're not a
Okay,
ball
please
bounces
wrap up
intelligence.
your sentence.
Sure. I mean, and it doesn't matter what you use. The idea is like, yeah, to get them to write it down. I think
Thank you.
So, it kind of sounded like, and it was like this in the last two.
Stem cells?
That you could be doing this at the same time as doing some of these things. And doing maybe some class discussions, not a lot of writing, maybe a little bit of writing, but not really involved with claims and evidence and reasoning. So we're all a little bit along the spectrum. Just a quick show of hands, high school teachers. And then middle school. Okay. So well, I'll do that again. High school teachers, and then take a peek around the room because we're going to do an activity where we have to kind of match up. And then middle school is everybody else. So, since we've had some experience doing some writing class, we're going to do an activity that I use in class to kind of mix kids up so they're not always talking with their table mates. And then you can set a criteria, whatever you want. So, you're going to stand up and then hand up and then pair up with somebody from your same grade level or content area. And you're just going to consider the following. Maybe some successes you've had with writing, some frustrations that you've had when you've gotten student writing back. So I taught 5th grade, so I was able to see their language arts writing and then turn around and see what they wrote in science, and it was like it was frustrating because they could write really well in language arts, like capital letters and the sentences and transition, and I get their science and it's like, what happened? So that was a frustration. And then maybe some challenges you've had. So you're going to stand up and hand up and then pair up with somebody from your grade level or content, not from your table if possible. And then you're going to discuss this. Are we clear? Stand up, hand up, pair up.
Are we going to be
We're gonna move forward.
Might as well just have it up.
Middle school, she said, 8th? I teach this 8th grade, is that what she said?
Middle school or high school?
I don't do 8th grade, I do 6th.
Sorry.
Yeah, we would we're there. So yeah.
Okay.
This topic is about
Frustration. My biggest frustration
Okay.
with writing is probably kids not using their own internal voice, using either my voice in their writing or the textbook or Google or whatever. They're not using their own. I'm going to say it's more
It's just that hint, so give an example of not discussed in class. So they kind of have to think, okay, what's another version? Right, and like some of them draw a blank, but by drawing the blank, what they're saying is, okay, I can memorize what you told me, but I really don't get that. Right? If you can't think of an example of force that I haven't said, you don't understand what a force is. Or of a combustion reaction besides gasoline. I can't think of another one. Well, then we're not there yet. So that's one thing I've tried.
How long are you giving him for this part? How long are you giving him for this part?
Not finished. She's about to round it up.
I love all my students. No, but I tell you, because otherwise, yeah, they just regurgitating.
I already had to
Give an
put
example, like, I'll pick the first example I said in class.
I had just 7 and 6. I was like, like in the beginning, especially, I do the same thing.
So we did one, and so there's some pictures and and so they
And ask them to pull out the most, say in a sentence, what this paragraph. So that we kiss it out. Summarize.
Yes.
One of my biggest frustrations is that for every lab, they have to write a conclusion and they have to tell me whether their hypothesis is supported or refuted and evidence why that is and what they did discover and the evidence that supports that. And some of them have gotten the idea that, you know, their data they need to put in there and they need to put lots of data in, but it's still very jumbled for some of them. And then that just tells me that if it's jumbled on their paper when I'm reading it and I can't follow it, then that's probably how it is in their head, and therefore they don't get it either. So trying to get them organized to take that information, organize it like they would an English paper,
Right.
but they're not in that mindset, I guess, that it's should be that way.
Hopefully, we'll give you a tool that they might be familiar with in English that you can use in science that will help scaffold their thinking so that they can organize their thoughts on the paper before they're expected to write a response. And so hopefully that will not be a frustration much longer for you. And that seemed to be from the first group too, was they're not producing something that shows me what their knowledge is that I can have a conversation with them about, that they can tell me about it if I ask them some questions, some prompting questions. But when I have them go write, it's like they're staring at a blank piece of paper and have no idea. We just had a conversation about it, write it down, right? So we're going to give you some tools so that you can, that it's a process that you can use routinely over and over again, so that when they do go to write independently for like a summative test, that automaticity in those prompting questions will be there, just like that happens in language arts. You always start with a topic sentence, and you have a transition, and then you have your evidence, and then you have your explanation. They build that self-talk after they've used the form 100 times, okay? And that was kind of the same sentiment from the first group. They also shared that they're pretty decent at stating a claim and including evidence, but that reasoning part of connecting their evidence to the claim with that scientific principle got them tripped up. So hopefully you'll have some tools that you can help guide their thinking and scaffold it a little bit for them today. So,
Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit of the why. We wanted to share this idea of the CER model with you. Your science and engineering practices, by doing just an effective scientific argumentation or explanation, you're actually covering 3 of the SEPs. Because you're having them construct explanations, you're having them be engaged in an argument from evidence, okay, and you're obtaining and evaluating and communicating information. So it's really tied into the next generation of science standards. And it's also tied in with the Common Core.
so obviously you guys are really familiar with the SEPs. How many people are familiar with the literacy and writing and history standards and technical subjects for science? Okay, so in the language arts ELA Common Core standards, there is just for ELA, but they also for 6th through 12th grade have reading and writing for, history, science, and technical subjects. And so this has specific standards for how you should read and write in a discipline-specific way. So you can see in this one, for 6th through 8th grade, they are talking about claims, evidence, and reasoning, but it also talks about some of the stylistic stuff. That talks about what kind of tone are you using and what kind of transition words are you using. So it's not just a bullet list of things, it puts it into a paragraph form. So these are part of the why that we're doing it today too, because it's part of the Common Core standards, not just the science and engineering practices. And we talked about earlier that besides from all that, that's all great, but really we want to know what kids know, and if they need support in putting together the what with the why. So they have the evidence, but why? And how can we help build that connection for them by using some sort of tool or support that helps guide their thinking so they can generate the scientific principle and reasoning behind whatever. I'm not a science teacher, so I can come up with an explanation. So that's why.
Okay, so the CER, or Claim Evidence Reasoning Model, is basically a way to get organized to write an explanation. Obviously, the claim answers the question. It's very similar to what is the hypothesis, right? And so this might be in where your because, because the hypothesis always had a because. Okay, well, your because is going to be your reasoning. So you still can use that term if that's one that you are looking for, okay? But it's kind of, instead of the whole hypothesis conclusion, hey, it's more of just, well, what is your claim? What do you think it is? What is your evidence? What data have you collected? And what scientific principles does that relate to? How can you prove that that's really what happened? Okay, again, a claim, the claim is basically based on a question. Okay, it's a concluding statement, and it's about a sentence in length. The evidence. This is the scientific data that's been collected. It must be sufficient and relevant, because not all data is considered evidence. Okay, this is where you're probably going to have to be doing some extra teaching with your students as far as being very explicit of what is sufficient for the evidence and what is relevant evidence. There is data that is actually part of the claim and the essential question, but it's not part of what. I mean, you want the evidence as part of the claim, not the extra stuff. Okay? Like we used a 100 milliliter beaker to measure water. Well, I mean, that's not evidence, right? Okay, and most evidence is specific. It comes from the lab. Okay, the reasoning. This is your explanation. These are your scientific principles behind what they have seen and what they found. Okay, it shows detailed understanding, and it usually should be at least a few sentences in length. This is the meat. And we're going to show you how to put all three of those together into a complete paragraph.
And this is the part that they have trouble coming up with because they have to generate this, right? So this is the part that they have to, this is where you get their thinking, is can they apply that to the evidence in their claim? And so that's why this is the hardest part, is because they have to generate it.
Okay, so here it is in kind of a nutshell. So the claim, what do you know? Evidence, well, how do you know it? What did you collect? The reasoning, what are the scientific principles? And when you put them all together in word form, in sentence form, you have your explanation.
And those kind of questions are the self-talk that you can help your students build to ask themselves when they're going to write their scientific explanation, to help build that process and that scaffold for them. Okay, so we're going to, you guys don't need to write anything for this part. We're just going to go through a short example that you can use with your class to teach this framework. So you guys have a copy of this, and there's links in this presentation to one that you can edit and modify for however you want to use it. But really this is just a graphic organizer, and people who teach language arts are familiar with these and use them all the time. This one has just been tweaked to kind of fit our claim, evidence, reasoning topics, discipline-specific topic for science. And so really what all this is used for, it's a tool or a strategy to help guide their thinking as they're going, before they're writing. So in the writing process, this would be like the pre-writing. You're getting all your thoughts together, you're mapping it out, and it really helps to build it so it's not all jumbled up in here and so they can get it down on the paper. So it starts with the essential question. And so our essential question for this activity is my dad an alien? So we're going to use a non-content type example so that they're not learning two things at once. They're not learning the content and the graphic organizer. They're just going to be learning how to use the graphic organizer in this activity. So we're going to go through that. So let's see. So right here, the first box, it says science background and current knowledge. You can use this in multiple different ways. You can just have them put whatever they want in there to kind of see if you want to formatively assess what they already know about the topic. Have them fill that out by themselves. If you did a lecture and a lab and you want to review what you did in the lecture, you can tell them what to put in that box. So we went over chemical reactions. You're going to want to use that word in your scientific explanation, so put that in the box. That way you're guiding their thinking a little bit. So it just depends on how you want to do it in class. But this is important because that's going to help them come up with their reasoning right here. So this and this, when you teach it, they're connected. This is the why these two are relevant. Okay? So the reasoning is that scientific principle or background knowledge that they have that connects their claim and evidence. And then each of these is a claim, evidence, reasoning, and it has prompting questions in there. Ours are pretty similar. If you want to make it really specific to whatever lesson you are, to really guide their thinking that way, you can edit it and change it that way for each one, or just make it generic of the, what do you know, how do you know that, what's your reason why. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to watch a video. We're going to kind of collect data as we go. Oh, let me turn off the lights. thank you.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, I'm gonna back up for 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so the essential question is, how can you tell if your father is an alien? Okay, and that is what you are going to be viewing this for.
I have evidence that proves my dad's a space alien. He speaks a weird language. He drinks green stuff. He says he's from Albuquerque. I'm not buying it. I mean, just look at him. And one more thing, he has a spaceship. The evidence doesn't lie. My dad is an alien.
A highly advanced Audi A6 named to car and drivers 10 best.
Okay, so really short, really cute little way, but it's really easy to apply it to our graphic organizer. So based on that video and our background knowledge, our claim would be yes, my dad is an alien. So they could write that in there. Then our evidence, this video does a really good job of helping you have a discussion with your students of what is relevant evidence and what is sufficient evidence. I think she listed 5 things, we only have 3. Do you want all 5? Do you only want 3? Is 2 enough? So you can talk about that with your kids. And then sufficient. I didn't say what he was wearing that made it weird, I just left it as weird. Is that sufficient for you, or do you want them to go into more detail describing? So you can really use this to kind of hash out how you want your kids to write those sorts of pieces. And then the reasoning part, this is where we take the evidence and use that word, I think I used therefore, but you could use because. So I know that organisms from other planets, which was up here in my background knowledge, speak their own language, and my dad is speaking a funny or different language, so therefore he must be an alien. So it really helps solidify that you take that background knowledge and apply it to your evidence, and then relate that all back to your claim of he's an alien. And then we don't have to do the other 2 because it's a simple thing. So take a couple minutes, discuss at your table some of the ways you might want to or thinking about tweaking this, using it, and applying it in your classroom.
And then doing it in chunks like that is ask them to write a paragraph that says if you're playing it seriously, they're
Conversation?
Yes, they have the same.
Okay, if they have that, then they know.
okay, let's do it.
Okay. One conversation that came up in the previous session was that, well, I'm pretty sure they write in language arts, so why aren't they writing using evidence in science? Because I know they're being taught it in language arts. And what we talked about was, in language arts, this part is called your topic sentence. This part is still evidence, but it's of a different kind. It doesn't usually, a lot of times doesn't have numbers in it. And this is called your explanation of your evidence that relates back to your topic sentence. And what we also discovered was we use the colors blue, green, and orange. Well, in language arts, when they code their papers, it's green, yellow, red. So you might want to have a conversation with your language arts people to see what strategy they're using so that the kids learn one process, maybe just switch a few words, and collaborate that way so the kids, it's easier for them to transition into writing in science. All right, so they have their 3 pieces, but this is not a scientific explanation yet. So the next step that they have to do is put it all together into a paragraph form so that it is a scientific explanation. So what we've given them, again, is another scaffold to help support their thinking, because if you say, okay, take this and now put it in a paragraph form, they might look at the paper blankly and not read anything, and a lot of times because they don't know how to start. So there's some sentence stems here to help them start. These are just 3, there's lots of them. And it doesn't have to always go in the order claim, evidence, reasoning. Sometimes it starts with evidence. But it's just a way to support their thinking, to build that automaticity. And when I start writing, when they go to take the test, and they don't have the sentence stems, they'll have practice doing it instead of just staring blankly at the paper. So here's my example of not just taking my graphic organizer and taking each sentence from the box. So my dad is an alien, he wears funny clothes, etc. It has a full paragraph kind of incorporating those things in from the Common Core ELA standards of transition words and specific vocabulary and things like that. So, we believe that my dad is an alien. Our evidence comes from our observations of him at home. We observed him talking in a different language, wearing funny clothes, and he is using a spaceship to travel. We think our evidence supports our claim that my dad is an alien because we know that organisms from other planets speak different languages, may look different, and use different or new technology for travel. So that's a complete paragraph that has claim, evidence, and reasoning in it. But this is, again, another place to talk about relevant and sufficient data, because I could have said he is speaking a different language that sounds like somebody gargling water or whatever. He's wearing a funny clothes. So again, talk about what you guys want from your students in terms of writing. And then I think now, and I rushed through this because we didn't get to do this next part last time, so I'm sorry if I'm talking really fast. But you guys are going to get to practice so that you can get a feel for what your students will experience and maybe be thinking of what you want to do in your class. So,
okay, so they're going to be in pairs. Everybody has, that's perfect, again, perfect numbers. I love this. Okay, so the essential question, please write this in the essential question portion of your graphic organizer. Did a chemical reaction occur? The essential question is, did a chemical reaction occur? You will have links to these blank and stuff, so you'll be able to get somewhere if you like it. Okay, so here's the phenomenon. A beaker is filled 1/3 full of sugar. A layer of highly concentrated sulfuric acid is poured on the top. Over a period of seconds, you notice a substantial change in the look of the sugar. It becomes darkened and begins to bubble up and form a stiff black material which vents a strong vapor. Upon the completion of the reaction, you take a knife to the substance and notice it crumbles like a fine powder. So there's their phenomenon. The essential question is, did a chemical reaction occur? So what I would like you to do right now is use your background knowledge of chemical equations and write what you think would be
chemical reactions.
Chemical reactions. Evidence of chemical reactions.
In the background?
What is your, in the background. What is your background of chemical reactions? The differences between a physical change.
And there is possible vocabulary that you may want to use if you want to help start your thinking. Physical properties, chemical properties.
Color change, temperature change, precipitate.
So, color change and odor change. Texture.
Light produced and light was produced.
Because it's almost like your reasoning is talking about
is like going up the chain of going from here to here, right? I know a chemical reaction occurred because during a chemical reaction, materials.
Everybody, I feel like, feels like the evidence and the reasoning are kind of blurred or kind of conflated, but it helps to solidify that is the reason why, right? So even if it feels like you're rewriting the same thing, saying that that's the reason why helps to solidify that scientific principle that those are indicators of a chemical reaction. So in this example, it does feel a little repetitive in what you're writing or saying, but that helps reinforce that that's the scientific principle that you're using and applying to this phenomena. So go ahead and finish.
Well, you might have evidence, you might have some data that you're collecting here that does not really support it. You know, because some of these things are kind of, really? So just keep that in mind of what is the kind of evidence that's relevant to the claim.
demonstrates that a chemical reaction has
Okay, you have page 2, which has the sentence stems. I would like you as partners to please use one of these, even if it's not one that you particularly love. But practice using one of these, please, to put your claim, your evidence, and your reasoning together into a full paragraph.
I'm doing the bottom line.
And then write it, you're going to actually write it in your scientific explanation. This is where you write your scientific explanation. If you want to sketch it out by using the actual sentence frames, you can, and then write it into the bubble. Just for a second, please.
So then we would
Had like 3 sentences and then
Okay, you also have this as one of your handouts.
there's 2 boxes that say.
So this is a rubric that we have created. There is 9 bullets in each section. Each section is a continuum for each of the types of evidence and reasoning and claim that they are writing. We would have, with time, asked you to use a highlighter, and I would recommend you doing this with your students, to use a highlighter and highlight the terms that clearly show what's the difference between the effective or the competent or the developing. For instance, an effective explanation is the claim clearly and correctly answers the essential question versus the claim correctly. So the difference is clearly and correctly. And then the claim is not completely correct or unclear.
And this is another way just to help give them a frame of what they need to be writing. So if we don't tell them what or how to write, then they're just going to do it on their own and it ends up jumbled. So this is a good way to, again, to help guide them in being able to produce an effective scientific explanation. And going through this rubric process, I know in language arts class, it can be time intensive, but then they have the language that you want them to use in their writing.
And the reason we want them to be familiar with the rubric is because they're going to be using it to help their peers by doing a peer review. And this is what we are going to be doing next. On your tables, you have 3 different colors of sticky notes. And this is a great strategy that you can use in your classroom for peer reviews. When I say go, I'm going to ask you to exchange with another partnership on a different table. I do not want you to simply switch across the tables, please. You are going to do a peer review using the sticky notes. So you will be placing the sticky notes on their scientific evaluation. You'll use yellow if you need them to explain something. Maybe you need further explanation on what they meant in part of their writing. You'll use blue if you agree with them, and then tell us why you agree. I agree with what you said as far as this being evidence of a chemical reaction. Or pink, because you want to give them some help and ask them, have you considered? Maybe they only found one of the pieces of evidence for a chemical reaction. So you might say, well, have you considered thinking about what the bubbles meant to help them out? Okay, so you're going to exchange.
Wait, hold on. I just want to make sure that, because this wasn't very clear. So when you get your partnerships paper, you're going to read it and look at your rubric and determine where they are on the rubric right now. Then you're going to use these, and we give students this so we don't get comments like, wow, you have really pretty handwriting, or nice job. So that these are sentence stems to help guide their thinking so that they write more productive and constructive comments. But these are going to be helped to move their claim from developing, competent, and effective, help them move up the rubric. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So swap with a different table.
You can just hand them yours, and you can sit where you are, and then go ahead and use your sticky notes.
He's gonna take
I have to
it.
swap it again.
Is
that your
It's on my paper, but whatever.
Is that your notebook that you
Just
started
keep it
this
all
summer?
there.
Double swap.
Whatever.
Does everybody return their papers and their sticky notes to their people? Okay.
Okay, so here is the rubric with just a couple of examples. So for an effective scientific explanation, the essential well, this is the same essential question, but it's still scientific knowledge. Liquids 1 and 4 are the same substance, on whether or not a subject has changed. Versus some of the liquids are the same, or none of the liquids are the same, or specifies the wrong solvent.
So adding this to your rubric, we didn't add it on the one that we created because it would have been too long. So we just picked out some of the claim, evidence, and reasoning stuff and made concrete examples to show students what does clearly look like. Some is not clear, but it's better than not stating any at all. But it's not as good as being specific with those. So this is another way to help explicitly show them what you want them, what you're looking for in their writing.
And then for the evidence, you guys are wondering, well, how many pieces of evidence do I need to collect? And you'll have an idea of what they should be collecting. Okay, so all of them, 1 or 2, none. Okay, so it's a way to make it easy for them to understand.
How did you guys like or how do you feel like the editing process would be good for your class? Everybody was like, oh, please let me have a blue sticky on my paper.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it gives an opportunity for students to see other people's, how they write
Right.
and how they use the evidence, and maybe clarifies things that were kind of foggy in their head.
Yep.
For the person who already has it, it's just practice for them on helping to others to try to take those thoughts and
Yeah,
make
and so
it more concrete.
go ahead.
Kind of following that, we wrote essentially the exact same thing. However, the way she started her sentence, I liked a lot better.
Oh,
so
nice.
that is a good thing, kind of for kids.
And so what we're not going to have you do, but you have your students do, is take that feedback and rewrite it. And then you get to grade something that's already been edited and cleaned up a little bit. So you're not having to do as much work.
Right. It allows them to be successful because it adds some help. Okay, so little table talk. How might this process benefit your students? What challenges might your students have with the graphic organizer or maybe the rubric, the peer review process, the revision, and then brainstorm how you might use this process in your classroom. Very short conversation. What can you do with this form? How can your kids use it? Do you think that they would be okay with it? What struggles do you see them having with it?
And this is
Testing gets closer. You know, whether it's an AP test or an NGSS test, or Common Core, or whatever. Like, okay, when asked to present, let's, you know, we all have our own style and whatever, but state test is a little more uniform. I think this would be a good test.
Or like you need to strengthen your sentence by typing this.
Has to do it, kind of spread it around.
Right, early. Something like almost like
I was thinking the same thing and thinking of how we do ours, and I'm like, oh.
a dozen times.
Well,
now,
I don't know.
where it's becoming more.
Yeah. I do like the idea of like a post something where you
Yeah, I do that too. Right now, I'm gonna write down all the names
Not even your
who are not writing appropriately.
I don't know if you've done it, but you know, it reviews like the concept of polymers.
Okay, please finish your sentence.